Hello everyone, my name's Kevin and this is a demonstration of my Trees Like a Breeze asset that you can find on the Unity Asset Store. Everything in this package is going to be under the Trees Like a Breeze folder, and it's very simple to use. We start off with a terrain. Our terrain looks fairly nice, but we don't have any trees on it, so let's fix that, shall we? And we're just going to drop this tree placer script, and in order for this to work, your terrain has to meet a few criteria. Firstly, it has to actually have some tree prototypes. I have 7 here, but even 1 will do, but more is better. And the size, width and length, it has to be a square terrain, and it has to be a power of 2. And this is because I am using the height map resolution, and it's very convenient if they're both the same number. And the height map resolution has to conform to power of 2 plus 1. So yeah, I'm not sure why, but anyway, if you don't have any of these settings proper, it'll just throw a little debug log on the console and say, hey, there's a problem, please fix. So here we have our trees. Let's add a few more, shall we? We have a density slider. Crank this up. Works pretty good. But you'll notice there's no trees being placed underneath this water plane. And that's because the water plane has a tag that is water plane. And any object in your scene, or I should say the first object in your scene with this tag, will be found by my Trees Like a Breeze script, and it finds it with a GameObject.find object with tag, and it uses the Y value of the position of that object, to determine where trees should be placed. So if we grab this and move it up and down, you'll see it's pretty fast actually, and the trees just kind of magically conform to the new terrain. Already you can see that saving tons of time. So let's continue. There's much more to show. The maximum tree spacing is pretty cool. When I was first making this script, I kind of looped through every position in the terrain, and sometimes trees would be so close they would be touching each other. And so the minimum tree spacing just adds space between trees. So if you crank that up, you'll never have any trees closer than 10 units. It also ensures that your player can actually walk between trees, which was kind of a happy accident. But because we're actually sampling fewer points on the terrain, we need to increase density to compensate. And you'll notice you'll have kind of things like this if your settings are a bit too extreme, where things are kind of aligned to a grid. But when you're playing the game at eye level, you can't really tell. Next we have max slope, pretty self-explanatory. We don't want trees to grow on cliffs, so you can just crank this down. If it's set to 1 and the trees only grow on flat terrain, set to 90, they grow absolutely anywhere. Whoops, not that one. Yeah, I like around 40. 40 is good. Then we're going to get into the distribution of the trees. Right now it's just pure random, and they're placed with Perlin noise, and that's a random pattern that has smooth transitions. And right now at scale 1, it's essentially just random everywhere because the scale is so small. As we crank this up, well, let's bring that down to demonstrate things better. You'll notice the pattern kind of snaking across the terrain. As I bring this high enough, you'll notice there's more clumps, more little paths between them. And as I crank this up, you'll see the pattern kind of moving across the landscape in a kind of a strange way. And that's actually the pattern scaling up. So I find maybe about a 75. Yeah, I like these. I like that size of tree clump. But now we have like this kind of circular thing here, and it's got a very well-defined edge. So we can add some randomness to the edge just by cranking up roughness. So we have the same layout, but here is the trees with no roughness, and here's max roughness. Max roughness is so extreme, it essentially makes it completely random again. Somewhere around 0.2, that looks pretty good. And because Perlin noise is a fixed pattern, every time you apply this script to this terrain, or any terrain, and you scale the Perlin noise the same amount, you're going to get the exact same pattern. The same shapes, that little circular thing in the middle is always going to be there. And so to fix that, if you want a different pattern, but a same kind of distribution, you can just keep hitting randomize pattern, and you get the same size tree clumps, but it just jumps to a different point in the pattern. So you just click until you find one you like. That looks pretty good. I like how evenly distributed the clumps are. There's nothing too big, nothing too small. Maybe let's crank up roughness a bit. Cool. But now we have this little village in the middle, and we don't want trees to grow there. So we can use masking, a very useful feature. And I have this occluders list that is currently empty, and masking is turned off. So we turn masking on, and it's simply a matter of throwing in objects that have sphere colliders. So I've pre-made a few here, like this big sphere collider. It's just a regular game object with a sphere collider. It has the ignore raycast layer, so the camera that I'm using doesn't think there's an object between it and the player. And it's a trigger to allow the player to actually pass through it. And we're actually not using the collider per se, but we're using the radius. And I just made it a collider so you have this nice visual GUI circle. So let's go back to our terrain and just throw this game object right into our occluders list. And just like that, you can see exactly what it did. That's pretty cool. We have a bit more here. So I made a second object to clear out that area. And if you'll notice, there's this little lighthouse thing here, and I made another little one for that. Cool. So that clears out all of our desired area, and everything still conforms. So if we keep hitting regenerate trees, you're going to just get a new random pattern, but it's always going to conform to this. New Perlin noise, everything just works. This billboard start, that is just a control that I've copied from the terrain options right here, because that's a very useful thing you'll want to mess around with, and I just figured it'd be convenient to put it in here, allowing you to kind of optimize performance of your game, because let's face it, this is a lot of trees. And we have delete all trees. It doesn't actually delete your settings though, so you can just hit generate and they all come back. And the last thing here is the tree count. And yeah, that's just how many trees are in your scene. So you can kind of get a feel for how your game runs, and you could decide my tree limit is 700. Then you could just tweak these settings until you're down to about 700, and you're good to go. So yeah, that is pretty much it. The trees aren't linked to this script at all. The way the terrain asset works in Unity is once a tree is placed there, whether the game is running or not, the tree is there to stay. It's a bit odd, as when you stop the gameplay, when you stop the game from running, things usually revert back to their previous state, but terrains do not do that. So everything you tweak here is there to stay. You can even remove the component and continue to modify your trees with this. By shift clicking, you can delete some, and it just works. So that's it. I really hope this saves you as much time as it has me. It's pretty fun to use actually, and solves the problem I had pretty perfectly. So thanks for watching, and I hope you enjoy it.